the consultant had said, you have cancer. The consultant was very clear. If you have no treatment, if this hadn't been picked up and you have no treatment starting now, you would have 3, 4, 5 months to live.
Not many people have been told that. I don't even know how to ask this question. I certainly don't know how you're going to answer it. What on earth happens in your brain-body system when you hear that?
I shut down. I know that I shut down. I grew up, I decided I wanted to be an actor. I went off and I would go and do dance classes on a Friday night. I was the only boy there. But what I did have to do was I had to lie to the boys in my class what I was doing on a Friday evening. So my mum would rock up to the village hall in the car, I'd jump out, I'd have a look around, I'd run in, and then there'd be these really big glass windows that covered the back of this hall, and I'd be in there in my lycra and my tap shoes. And then I'd see walking past a group of my friends.
Oh no!
And this would happen on a regular basis, and I'd say, can we close the curtains, do you think, please?
So Richard Tyler, you are an author of 2 books, Jolt and As a Kite Falls. But also you are an actor, singer, not so much now, but historically, Phantom of the Opera, Les Mis, sort of the big shows that people would know, but also a psychotherapist, keynote speaker, and now somebody who has gone through a life-changing illness as well. So you're going to have lots of things that you can bring to the table today that I think, because it's multifaceted, it delves into the arts, which people, well, certainly I am intrigued by. If you're not artistic or creative, it's really, and I don't feel I'm creative, although some people would say I am, but I see that you're a very creative and present as a very creative person. But also you've got this very structured brain that's also quite poetic. And it's structured in the fact that I think you can deliver workshops and you can, do the psychotherapy thing. But then in other ways, obviously, you're a bit more free. So tell me first about what made you write the second book, because people that don't know you won't know a bit of that backstory. So what made you write As a Kite Falls?
Some inner compulsion, which was not ever about selling it.
No.
I knew I wanted to write some more, but I didn't think it would be this book. But I felt like here I was living through some adventure that I didn't think I'd asked for. Consciously I didn't ask for, unconsciously I probably did. Consciously I didn't. And I found myself with an incurable illness and with a high chance of leaving remission behind and relapsing. So there's a high propensity for that. And I felt like I needed to make some sense, not just make some sense of what had happened, but I felt like I needed to capture it. It felt like it was actually a bit of a legacy piece, because I wanted the people that are most dear in my life to understand perhaps what I hadn't shared about the journey. I didn't quite know what that was at the time, but I felt like there's stuff that was in my heart and that I felt that needed to be expressed. And if they ever chose to pick that up and read it, then cool. And if not, then that's okay. But this would allow me a chance. And, the from point of diagnosis, everything happened so incredibly fast, and I was pretty much done to. I felt like I wasn't able to recall it all. I felt like I couldn't hold the moment, because you'd move from one beat to the next beat to the next beat, and then you were dragged to the next beat, and And then there was all these bits in between where I'd go, I can't even make sense of. I mean, I'd got to remission. I'd got to the point of remission before I'd even made sense of, and I don't even know if at that point I'd said the words, "I have cancer."
Really?
So I'm in this point, and actually, whilst there was enormous joy, I remember lying in the bed, hospital bed. I'd just gone in for a 3-day chemo treatment, and we had a call from the consultant. And I just arrived, I just sat in the bed and we're putting my bags down and we got a call from the consultant to say, the PET scan shows that you're in remission. And whilst there was a joyful part, there was also the part that was like, but fucking hell, I've got to stay here for 3 days to have more toxins pumped into my body. At this point, I felt incredibly unwell because I've been through quite a few of these 3-day cycles. And I'm going, but I hadn't even made sense that I've even got cancer, and here I am being told I'm now in remission. So it was in this forever catch up. So I think in a overly long answer to your question, God, we're going to be here for 8 weeks. I felt like I needed to recall that. I felt like I needed to go through piece by piece. I needed to put that piece out and go, right, that was that, and then that was that, and then that was that. And I needed to be able to do that because there were some missing pieces.
Yeah.
There were still some missing pieces, but I was able to capture quite a lot.
So, I mean, it wasn't overly long. I think it could have been even longer because it was a very complex situation.
Well, and then...
But one thing I will say is I, for one, am so glad you did it. So our paths never crossed until the point of, obviously you've got some management with the book, and someone had reached out to me on email to ask if there was a chance of coming on the podcast or whatever. And sometimes, to be honest, I said to you earlier, I don't always say yes because it's always so booked ahead. And it's almost like I can't cope with fitting more people in. But I read the synopsis and was like, yes, definitely. And then I said where the studio was, which was Northampton, and the lovely lady was like, actually, I don't know if he's going to be well enough. Some days are easier than others. And so I was just like, it's fine. I'm going to come to you because I wanted to do this story. And then I read the book. And anyone that follows me on Instagram or Facebook or has seen the reviews the review I did on your book will know that I read it in one day, which we've discussed earlier, it never happens. And I literally was surrounded by loads of people on a busy train. So lots of distractions, which for me is usually a no-go. I can't even read a text message from beginning to end. And then there was this stop-start because I was doing another podcast in Manchester and I actually ended up in Cafe Nero crying my eyes out at one point in public, which again, I never normally do. But it was the most beautiful book I've ever read. I've said this to you so many times and I know you're massively uncomfortable with this bit. But honestly, even if you haven't had a life-altering illness, I said to you, and I'll be quite honest, I needed to read that book. There was lots of things going on. Just emotionally, I was in a bit of a messy place. And I felt like you were talking to me. Although you were telling me your story, I felt like you already knew me and you were like, right, Ella, you need to sit down and listen. And not at all that you're bossy like that, but I just felt that. Yeah, but it didn't come across in the book. It's not a bossy book. It's a beautiful book, but I just got so much out of it. And because of the way you've layered the story together you've used... you've turned to the seasons, but also to the Japanese way of doing things, which is haiku, isn't it? Have I said it right? A haiku.
Haiku, yeah.
And the way you've layered in these little poetic, they're like limericks, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're kind of like, but it does do what it's supposed to do, which is it gets you to pause. Mm-hmm. And I've told so many people about Ma since I've read the book. I've used it probably in every session since. And I've sort of said, it's not mine, I've read it in a book. And then I've told them what the book is and then explained. And it's just, there's so much about that book that it doesn't matter what you've been through. It feels as though you're gifting us the overriding lesson, which is the most important bit of your story, is that you have managed to make it feel like it's my story. And I think that I've got to say that because I really want people to buy the book. or listen to the book. I don't know, is it on audio yet?
No,
so
not
it's
yet.
Kindle and
Maybe.
paperback.
Yeah, might be.
But even if you don't feel like you can read a book, and I'm saying this truthfully because I'm an Audible kind of girl, this book you will read from beginning to end without stopping. It is so, 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 so beautiful.
Thank you very much.
So I wanted to just be completely honest about that, because I'm not, by the way, getting any percentage of the book. I just want people to buy it. I want people to get it because it's so good. It's so beautiful. It's so life-changing. So tell me, it's true. So tell me, it's called As a Kite Falls, and you explain it beautifully in the book. So we don't want to say too much about what's in there because I do want people to get it. But tell me about the kite falling, you know, the descent and the ascent.
Yeah, so I have there's a lot of my childhood where I feel like I can't place moments, I can't place experiences. And there's one that stays with me very vividly, which is our family home was in Buckinghamshire, and we had Coombe Hill nearby, which has a very beautiful monument on top. And I would go along there with my dad on quite a regular basis to sometimes just to walk and sometimes to fly a kite. And neither my mum nor my dad are and were especially good at dealing with difficulties and challenges and things that didn't go the way that they wanted them to go. So almost that being able to bear the gap between what we hope for and what we get was always difficult for both of them. My mother's still alive. She still finds it enormously difficult to bear that gap. And I would walk with my dad, and we'd walk up the hill and we'd fly the kite, and I was always he was always the kite thrower and I'd be the kite holder, and I always felt this enormous responsibility for a successful flight. And as anyone who's ever flown a kite might know, that it is literally in the luck of the winds and the right gust of wind that sets you off on this adventure, on this beautiful dance in the sky that happens. And off we'd go, and this thing would take flight, and on many occasions, once it had taken flight, it would quickly come crashing down and set its course for grass. And that was kind of where our kite flying experience would end in that moment. I remember I'd see my dad's just despair at it all, of his. I mean, during his life, he would go when anything didn't go. It was like his own language that he spoke. Just no one else could make any sense of it, but I knew that it meant enormous frustration.
Yeah.
And he would have this enormous frustration that the kite had crashed, and he'd come back over and he'd have picked the kite up, and that would be it. We'd pack the kite away and thank the Lord we'd get in the car and go home, because I would go, I can't bear this because I don't know what this is for. I don't know if his response was his disappointment in me, or the wind, or the kite, or the day, or I never knew. We'd go home, we'd sit in silence, and probably a week later we'd do the same thing again. And I think from there, I was never taught or modelled an experience of how do we deal with the crashing descent in our lives. And yet I was brought up very much within a familial system and within a culture, and I'm of an age where ascent was everything. Yeah. So up, more, bigger, go to school, get a better job, earn more money, have a bigger house, have more children, have more cars, have more. It was always about increase and never taught about how do you deal with life when the terrible things happen. that you are not expecting, that you can't plan for, that feel as if they happened like that, feel as if you have no agency and control in them. I was never taught that. I mean, we live now in a multi-billion industry of personal development, and much of it is about teaching people how to fly.
Yes.
Books, videos, courses on how to fly your kite, metaphorically. But not a lot teaches us how do we hold and bear the grief and loss of a descent.
Yeah.
When we are plummeted, when our life goes into free fall. And my dad would just stomp off if any descent, anything that just didn't work in his life, big or small, it wouldn't be talked about. It would be buried away. I watched his mother die. He didn't know how to deal with that. He would just get on. He was incredibly stoic. He'd lost his own father at a very early age. He was packed off to a boarding school with him and his younger brother. I mean, there's a lot written about people's experiences of boarding schools.
Yes.
And I imagine it wasn't an environment that was particularly nurturing or tender or compassionate when those boys experienced loss and dissent and grief. So I guess, that was, I don't think I've ever been especially good at bearing dissent.
Do you think you self-abandoned? Because there was something there you said about you'd get in the car and you wouldn't know whether it was you or whether it was the wind or, what it was he was frustrated with. And a child at that age doesn't really have the complex thinking to be able to say, oh, it's okay, it's because he lost his father quite young and then went to boarding school, and it's probably because he hasn't learnt to process emotion very well, so that's cool. Was there a part of you that really sort of thought, oh, do I need to be more?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm almost 52, and I still have that processing. I still have that story.
Yeah.
Which is, so what I feel like I'm able to do now is I'm able to pull it back. I can recognise the story that I tell, or I recognise the very early promise that I made to myself about always endeavour to be more. You can always be, I wrote, the irony of writing Jolt, which was always about at the heart of it, one of the golden threads was good enough is no longer enough.
Wow. Right.
So that is on the back of the book. We're living in a time when good enough is no longer enough.
Yeah.
And that is what I've lived with for a lot of my life. And so I'm pretty sure that then I'd have been running a story of, it's me. Whilst I might have considered what might this be, I reckon the conclusion I would have come out with is that's me. That's me not in this moment being enough for him. My kite flying isn't enough, but actually it's an identity piece.
Well, he's not happy when he's with me. It's that, isn't it? He's not happy when he's with me.
And it would always be in a moment of dissent. It would be, I'm not a sporty soul, but sometimes I would quite like just playing a bit of cricket on the driveway, and I would always bat and he would always bowl, and I would bat, and you could bet your life, I could never get into the school cricket team, but you bet your life I would top his roses.
Yeah.
Always. Or I'd go through his hanging basket, and it would be, his garden was his life.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't know what to do with it. He would huff and puff and, and we'd go through that, and then I'd go, we wouldn't laugh about it. There wouldn't be a joke about it. There wouldn't be oh, it's all right, oh, sorry. It would be this kind of heartbreaking moment of going, a cause for disappointment.
You've upset him again. That's tough.
He was never angry.
No.
It was never saw him. I saw this kind of enclosed anger. It had a lid on it. He was never angry with me.
No.
He didn't have a vehicle for expressing anger. He didn't have actually a vehicle for expressing any of the emotions that we might say are trickier to allow out, especially for men to allow out.
Yes.
He didn't have a way, and I watched it with, from small things in life, from getting a parking ticket through to, he got his own cancer diagnosis, and that was from day of diagnosis to him passing was 9 months, and the poor man didn't have a way of being able to express his fear.
And what's interesting about what you've said there about the expression and the fact that he didn't get angry and it stayed as a sort of just about to blow frustration, maybe like keeping it in, but is that actually for men, healthy anger, which is a hard thing to find and to express, is a really useful emotion if you can get it done right, which is the hard bit, because that's where you'll probably get the endorphins and the testosterone and the dopamine, but men aren't naturally good at processing emotion and reflecting and generalizing here, but it's harder. There's lots of genetic differences in terms of the brain and stuff, so the fact that he couldn't even do the anger bit or the fear bit, in the most crucial of moments, I suppose, his nervous system must have been shot to pieces.
Oh, yeah.
He would have just been trapped in this emotional response on the inside and just bubbling up all the time.
Yeah, but it was pathologized. So he would take Librium, and he would take another pharmacological intervention, I guess, was his way of dealing with it. And he would pop one of those. And I think I do remember asking him what they were for. And he would say for anxiety. So how that's our normal medical model, that it's still dominant for us, that anxiety or stress or depression, they are pathologized. It is an illness.
Yeah.
That generally the medical model, whatever your views are of where much of that might stem from, for him that's what he would do: pop a pill, and the same. My mum's same model. You've got something wrong? What do you take for it? Always there was never any sense of thinking that might go, what's this for? What's the purpose? What's wanting to come through? But it would be repressed, and I've read a lot of Gabor Mate's work.
Brilliant man.
And a brilliant man. And his book really, where he talks about the impact of trauma on our nervous system and on our life-altering illnesses.
Yeah.
And there will be, I know lots of people that won't subscribe to that idea. For me, I do subscribe to it, and I do believe that his system was so overloaded with stress and anxiety, and his nervous system was so shot that our body has to respond to that in some way.
Oh, it definitely
has to get
does.
us out of that. And he cancer closed his life off, and I wonder the same for my own life. I wonder if my inability for much of my life to express the stuff that is most difficult to express culminated in a bit of my system just toppling over. I mean, I know science tells us that we all have cancerous cells within our body, where they're all, most of the time, they're lying dormant until they spring into action, until there is something that just pushes them over the edge. And
well, my understanding of this, and I kind of want to check in with you because you've got the lived experience, but also because you also work in the same, or have worked in the same field and still do with the Willow Tree, but more of a coach. Am I right in thinking that's more coaching people through?
So I still have a few therapeutic clients that I work with, but the Willow Tree work, really, when we set the cancer charity up, was the shoulder to shoulder and heart to heart. So the heart to heart piece, I guess, is an emotional support for people living with cancer,
So the reason I bring that up is because this is something that you still do on a kind of daily basis with the work that you do after experiencing what you went through. And My understanding with cancer, and I think it's important to bring this up because we're talking about emotions, and some people will be thinking, oh, I'm not very good at expressing emotion. I think I might suppress or repress. My understanding is there's certain epigenetic tags in terms of, genetic predispositions. Also, if your system is constantly stressed, i.e. adrenaline, cortisol, essentially over time we get out of balance and out of equilibrium and we become acidic and inflamed. And then the body has to work harder to do its normal job. So we're putting a bit more pressure on because we're not dealing with stress very well. And then if there are those sort of clusters of cancer cells that aren't triggered yet, the body doesn't have as much energy perhaps. And this is just kind of the easy way to explain it, to keep them from clustering. So it's not like, what did I do to cause cancer? It's looking at the epigenetics. It's also looking at how you are processing or not stress, what coping mechanisms that you have in place to deal with that. And also, I know with a lot of people that have gone through trauma, me being one of them as well, there can be this disassociation from physical pain. You just be like, oh no. And I had this experience when I was pregnant. I had really terrible heartburn. And I only know that reflectively because at the time, people kept saying, oh, do you think she'll be hairy? You've got a hairy baby if, you've got really bad heartburn. I was like, oh no, I don't think so. She came out with hairy ears, hairy shoulders, hairy back.
Goodness.
So, and then I realised after giving birth that I did have heartburn, but I was so disassociated from it. And even during childbirth, I didn't use pain relief at all. That doesn't mean it wasn't painful. It just means that there's obviously a pain threshold issue here. And I used to say, I've got an amazing pain threshold. Actually, I think what I'm saying is I zone out of pain. I disassociate. And that isn't good when it comes to stress because you're also going to be disassociating from your nervous system. And I'm always honest about it because I think sometimes as a psychotherapist, there's this idea that somehow you've got it all sorted and you know everything. And it's
Haven't you?
Yeah, no.
Haven't you?
No.
Oh, why are we even having this conversation?
I know. I should leave right now, quite frankly. I don't know why I'm here. So I'm just honest about that because I think it's just important for people to sort of not feel like they're doing something wrong. But on that note, it reminds me in the book you say you were 49 and you'd gone to therapy. Tell me about this part of the story because this is before diagnosis.
Yeah.
Not that I can believe that you were 49 then or now.
Yeah, I know.
You look amazing.
Yeah, thanks. So my journey with therapy had started really long before that as a client of therapy. And that had really started when, just before my first marriage collapsed. And I went to see a counsellor that I found locally to me. And it wasn't a great experience. I only went twice because I got so irritated with just sitting there where she'd go, And it was like, there has to be more to it than this.
There has to be.
It was twice I went and I paid for both times. And I didn't get any more than that. And I'm like, well, I mean, I understand I haven't come here for you to give me answers, but a little bit more than, that can't be it. So I moved on and I asked, I'm very fortunate to be friends with a wonderful professor of psychiatry and psychotherapy. And I went to him and said, can you recommend someone? And he said, actually, yes, I can recommend a lady. She works at a part of the Tavistock Clinic. She's brilliant with relationships. And I went to see her and I saw her for about 8 or 9 months and she was just utterly brilliant. And she didn't do any of that other strange thing that was going on with the first counsellor.
What was that? I mean,
I don't know what it was, but I think, do you know what? But I think probably lots of counsellors think that that's counselling.
They do. And you've got to be so hard not to be unprofessional, but it's not okay.
I mean, I think we need a degree of it, but if that's it. But not 50 minutes.
No, it's not okay. That's all I'll say on that. It's not okay.
I did, but you know what? It personally doesn't work for me. That, for some people,
Maybe
might be
enough.
just what they need.
No one I've ever met, but I hear what you're saying.
But okay. For me personally, that's not what I want from therapy. I mean, I'd never seen a therapist, so of course I didn't know what I wanted.
Of
and
course.
I was like, oh, this is interesting. Anyway, so I went to see this other lady who was just fabulous in basically holding my hand as I walked through a divorce and a separation. I felt like she really saved me, actually, because I was walking it whilst at that point I had done a lot of personal development work, and I had trained in psychology, and I had studied and I trained to be a coach, and I was working as a coach. So I felt like I had something accessible, and yet nothing had prepared me for being in this relationship, and in this relationship that was breaking down. And then that kind of ended. And then when I decided to train as a psychotherapist, and as you know, then we have to be in therapy, and I was just fortunate enough to find the most wonderful therapist who I still work with now on a weekly basis. She's utterly brilliant and everything that I could imagine and want and hope for. And when we moved this year, I said to Kelly, well, maybe it's time, just to stop working with Susan. She's in Wimbledon. We won't be in Wimbledon anymore. And Kelly's like, are you insane? Letting go of this woman who has an enormous waiting list and has just been an incredible lifeline for you. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. So I carried on with therapy. Was actually the only regular thing I carried on after the diagnosis. I had a few weeks out, and then we started to do sessions on a absolutely ad hoc basis. She was like, you just let me know and we'll make something work. And if you need 15 minutes, we'll make it work. And it was just what I needed. And most of them I would just sit there and cry because I just had no way to express this thing that I was in that I didn't ask to be in.
Yeah. I mean, thank goodness that you had a great therapist and people around you. But on that note, going back to the expression thing, which is obviously, we started talking about your dad and that inability to express. But this was different, wasn't it? Because you mentioned earlier on about the control element, because obviously that is an illusion. And even I say sometimes, me being my personality type, I need to be in control and stuff. And it's the idea, and I have had control taken away from me. And the idea of it not being, my thing, control not belonging to me, is still something I can logicalise it and rationalise it and analyse it. But when it happens to you, it's different. So what you went through, when we talk about cancer, it's probably the worst, the way that it happened for you, because of how far into it you were by the time you found out. So if it's okay, let's talk a bit about the illness leading up to the diagnosis and then the severity of it as well, because I think we have to be quite brutally honest with this episode, if you're comfortable with it, of course.
Yeah.
So let me introduce just the fact that you were ill for some time, just on and off, not feeling great.
Yeah, a few months. July 21. And I just had what I thought actually was a UTI of some sort. I didn't quite know what was going on, but it didn't seem like classic UTI symptoms. And I did go to the doctor, and they dip test and sent it off and said, actually it has come back with a bacteria. We're going to give you an antibiotic. So they gave me an antibiotic and cleared it up. And then a couple of weeks later, I had the same thing again. And they said, okay, so let's just do another test. And they sent it off and they came back and they said, oh no, there's no bacteria, so we're not going to give you an antibiotic. I'm like, okay, so what? And they're like, well, the doctor just says just keep an eye on it and see. And I thought, I think I should see someone. Who would I see? And they said a urologist. I said, well, I think I should be referred.
So you had to ask.
I had to ask. Yeah, I had to ask. I said, so that's what I'd like. I went to see a urologist, and I was still having some symptoms, but generally I wasn't feeling unwell. I was starting to lose a bit of weight, and I'm like, okay, I'm 49. This is how it's going to go. Starting to lose a bit of weight now. That's got to be a good thing. But I still wasn't feeling unwell. So I had the referral to the urologist. They did some bloods. They sent them off. They did an ultrasound. And there was a bit of a lull over the summer because she said, well, after the ultrasound, I'm going away on holiday. If there's anything, terrible that comes up, then we'll be in touch. And otherwise, I'll look at it when I'm back and I'll be in touch when I'm back. I'm like, okay, fine, all good. So she went away on holiday. I didn't think much more of it. I was kind of all right. And then I clocked that she was back from holiday, and then probably 10 days had gone on and I hadn't heard anything, and I'm like, okay, it's fine. And Kelly's like, have you phoned? And I'm like, no, but I will. And so I did get in touch, and she said, oh, actually, I was going to contact you. She said, the bloods have come back all fine. She said, but the radiologist who did your scan has looked back, because they happened to be the radiologist who did a scan for some kidney stones a few years before. And it was picked up on that scan that you had an inguinal lymph node, so deep in your groin, that was on the upper limits. But it wasn't over upper limits, so it wasn't flagged, but it was on upper limits. They're now looking at the same lymph node again, and it's out of upper limits. So I'm going to refer you to a haematologist. We needed to do a bit more digging. I'm like, okay. So I went to see a haematologist, and he said, yep. Bloods look okay. I was at this point, I'd had a few night sweats. Didn't really put too much together with that, but they would have been pretty drenching night sweats. So I would wake up in the night completely soaked. He said we need to do a biopsy, but it's quite difficult biopsy because it's right deep down in your groin. Ooh. So we have to go to a very certain type of surgeon who will go in through your tummy, go down, try and get the lymph that they need. And even then, the haematologist said, it might be some kind of lazy lymphoma. His very words were, "It's nothing to worry about. All manageable. But might be some kind of lazy lymphoma, but they lie dormant and it's fine. But let's just get the lymph node out and have a look." And a few weeks went on, and eventually the surgery was booked, and I went in and I had it, and it was sent off. And at this point, I was starting to have some more symptoms. I was starting to get some pains in my hip, quite severe pains. I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't lie on that hip. I was starting to get some more pain down into my groin. I'd had a couple more night sweats. I'd lost a bit more weight. We were in mid-COVID. Kelly'd got COVID. I'd got COVID. The pain got worse and worse. I was taken into hospital for 5 or 6 days for some pain management to try and get on top of the pain, which they didn't know what that was. I came out of hospital. I was due to have, I had at this point had a PET scan, and it had lit up. So it had lit up, the lymph node had lit up, and it had lit up that there was some activity in my sigmoid, so right next to the colon. And I was due to have a sigmoidoscopy. I came out from the pain management team. I went to have the sigmoidoscopy. I was probably 8 days of being COVID-free. And I had checked with the hospital, this is okay, isn't it? This is okay, I'm coming, I've had COVID. I've been in another hospital under the pain management team, but now I'm coming to your hospital for this procedure. Is that okay? Yes, turn up. I turned up, I was gowned up, I had the cannula in, and the consultant had an absolute meltdown that I shouldn't be there because I'd had COVID. He didn't want me in the ward.
Oh my gosh.
And then try to do some shaming and guilting of, well, we can do this procedure, Mr. Tyler, but the thing is, blood can splatter. If you're happy for our nurses to be at risk, if you're happy, stood at the end of the bed, if you're happy with that, Mr. Tyler, and you want me to go ahead, I'll do it if that's... And anyway, Kelly lost the plot.
Good for Kelly.
We marched out. A nurse walked with us who cried and said, "I'm so sorry that you've been treated like this. I just don't know what to make of it." Kelly went home, lost it with the consultant on the phone, said, "We still haven't got the results of the biopsy." He said, "I'm on holiday." She's like, "We need the results." He called back half an hour later. "I'm referring you to a different haematologist. We've got the results. She's going to call you within the next half an hour or so. She'll either want to see you at 5 o'clock today or she'll want to see you first thing tomorrow." She duly called, went to see her at 9 o'clock the next morning, and our life was forever changed.
Wow, that's hard to hear. That you were treated in such a way like that, like you say, the guilting and the shaming of... I know it was a difficult time, and who knows what was going on in that man's life for him to behave in that way.
He's still on Kelly's hit list, let's be honest. Kelly's still like, she's still planning her letter of complaint, and I'm like, this is 2021, babe. Let's move on, because our life the next day was hijacked by things that were more important than that man.
But just awful that, again, I don't know what was going on in his life, but it's just awful that you had to go through that. Anyway, like you say, it was hijacked. That's a good word, because, the prognosis at the time, was it stage 4?
Stage 4B.
Stage 4B.
Yeah, so B is just an indication of symptoms, active symptoms. So the night sweats, the weight loss. And generally, lymphoma is diagnosed fairly late on.
Yeah.
Because there aren't a lot of visible signs.
Yes.
Unless you have lumps that are in other places. Mine was very hidden. But the consultant was very clear. If you have no treatment, this hadn't been picked up, and you have no treatment starting now, you would have 3, 4, 5 months to live. So,
Richard, not many people have been told that. I don't even know how to ask this question. I certainly don't know how you're going to answer it. What on earth happens in your brain-body system when you hear that?
I shut down. I know that I shut down. So we were at the hospital for that day for I don't know, 3 or 4 hours with the consultant having tests done, and that was I after the consultant had said, "You have cancer, and this is what it means, and it's stage 4B, and it's a very rare lymphoma. There's only 500 or 600 people in the UK every year get this cancer. It's very aggressive, so we will treat it with the same degree of aggression that it is ravaging through your body. I want treatment to start this afternoon."
This afternoon?
Yeah, it couldn't because there wasn't availability, but it did start the next day. But I remember I was lying on the couch because I was, at this point, I was feeling very unwell. And when I went in, she said, "You're a poorly thing, aren't you?" I said, "I feel pretty poorly." So she said, "Do you want to lay down?" I was more comfortable laying down on the couch. This was before I got the diagnosis. So the diagnosis came lying down. And I remember her telling me, and I then remember her saying something about, this will be this will be like a 12-month timeline of treatment, because once you're through the chemotherapy, you'll then be having a transplant. And I'm like, what do you mean a transplant? She's like, well, you'll have a stem cell transplant. I'm like, fuck, I don't even know what that is. I don't know what that means. But anyway, back to here and now.
Yeah.
And I defaulted to Kelly. I know that Kelly will ask all the right questions. Kelly will have some capacity to hold all of this information. I don't have any capacity to hold it. I don't know that I want to hold it. There was a part of me that was relieved at knowing something, because I knew there was something not quite right in my body, but I just hadn't anticipated it being that bad.
So when you say that, you mean just the confirmation was a relief?
Yeah, so I'm not making this up. So there's a load of stuff going on in my body. It's not great, but someone's telling me that there is a load of stuff going on in my body.
And I'm not making it up. I'm not over exaggerating.
Well, I kind of had gone, the hip pain. I couldn't describe the hip pain. And at that point, the consultant didn't know whether it was activity from the lymphoma, but we weren't on top of the pain. And my mind went to Kelly. My mind went to all the things I haven't done in my life that maybe I won't have time to do. My mind went to Mia, and how do I tell a 16-year-old that her dad has cancer?
Awful.
That's not a conversation I am meant to be having. Why am I having that conversation? How will I have that conversation? I couldn't keep up. It was like I couldn't catch a thought or a breath to know what needed to happen next. And in some ways, I kind of just put my hands up and was like, just do this thing. They took some bloods. The phlebotomist came in, who was like a gentle giant. And he was the gentlest man. I just remember lying there going, I'm so grateful to you, because I don't really like having blood taken, and I'm working out quite quickly that I'm going to have a lot of needles stuck in my body.
Yeah.
And this man was so gentle. And I was like, I can't thank you enough for being so gentle with me. And he was like, that's okay. You don't need to be thankful to me. And I'm like, I absolutely do. I need to be thankful to you. But I was literally back at the hospital every day for the next 10 days or so. I was there every day for a treatment, a different drug, a post-treatment injection that I had to have in my tummy. It was just something every day. Nuclear tests they put you through to make sure that your body can withstand it, testing all of your organs, more scans. That they obviously had to fit a port, had to fit a PICC line in my arm. And I went in to have my PICC line fitted, and they said, oh, the radiologist, told me the name of the radiologist. And I was like, oh, that's the man who found my lymph node was enlarged. And I remember going down, gowned up, and I met him, and I said, actually, before we started talking about anything, I have to say thank you to you, because you've just saved my life. Oh. And he got teary and emotional, and I got teary and emotional. And I'm like, I'm sure this is not good for you to be teary and emotional as you're about to stick a line in my arm that goes directly into my heart. So let's gather ourselves together. You do the sciencey bit. And so we had that kind of emotional moment, but that felt really important to acknowledge that this man had picked up on that.
Yeah.
That this man had intervened in a way that had sent my life off on a course that could so very easily have been different. So I almost struggled to remember the day, because I did default to Kelly, because I trust Kelly implicitly with my life, and I knew, rightly or wrongly, that she would hold everything that I could not hold.
It's just amazing what the brain does. Like, this is why I love the work that we do, because when you hear stories like this, life stories like this, you realise how much the brain is doing for you. It's saying, no, you've got to be a little bit less involved with this. You can't do this. And it makes that decision for you, Kelly. And obviously she's very capable and all of those things, but you just couldn't deal with what was happening. There was obviously some disassociation and shutdown, like you say. But some of the...
I went home and I'm an avid reader, or I like music on, or I like to watch something on the telly or read something online, or so I quite like a mix of stimulus around me. Yeah, that's kind of our way. And for 10 days, 2 weeks, I couldn't have anything on. Kelly was like, "Do you want a magazine? Should I get your book? Should we want a bit of music on in here?" I'm like, "No." I just couldn't deal with anything. I sat and when I wasn't at the hospital, the best I could do was stare out the window. Just watching my life that had been flash by in a range of kind of colour and black and white, and
like grieving.
I was grieving for my life. At that point, I knew would never be the same again. I had no way at that point of understanding whether it could be better or anything, but I knew that it was never going to be the same. We were fast approaching Christmas, and I was, potentially this is the last Christmas I get to spend with Mia. For me, it was that clear. I don't know how I survived this.
I mean, just that image in my head of you looking out the window, watching the movie of your own life, but letting it all go.
I couldn't do anything more than that.
And to have to let go of your own life, not knowing what's coming next, is... Because obviously now we know you're here. Still classed as terminal though, aren't you? Am I right? It's
incurable.
Incurable.
Yeah. So there are people with mantle cell who are... We're not brilliant at managing mantle cell in the UK. So we don't have specialist consultants for it. In America, they wouldn't dream of having someone who has mantle cell would see a mantle cell expert.
Right.
We don't have any in this country, not one. So it is all blood cancers are fairly fast moving in their research and understanding and treatment. And when I was diagnosed, probably a year or two before that, prognosis for mantle cell would have been 3 to 5 years maximum. There are people with mantle cell now of 15, 16, 17 years. So there's plenty of time.
Yeah.
He says, hopefully there's plenty of time. And it's probably another strand of conversation, but we do an enormous amount to keep me as well as possible.
Yes.
But all I know is I will forever be under the care of the NHS every 3 months, having bloods, and more than the bloods, which are relatively slow to show up what is going on in my body. This is now down to me and the relationship I have with my body.
Yeah.
To be able to spot and listen and remain attuned to it.
Yeah. Which is the one thing... Well, it's where we started, not being attuned, not being aware, not being in touch with yourself, be that emotionally or physically. You have to be now.
Yeah.
There's no choice, really.
Yeah, I guess there is choice, and that comes, like every choice comes with quite a high price.
Yeah.
And consequence. Every single choice we make. Often I think we fail to see that every choice we either actively make or we unconsciously don't make.
Yes.
There is a consequence for that. And I know that there are times where I slip into still believing that I am the superhuman person that I believed I was pre-2021, of having a capacity to be a dad and be a husband and run a business. And, I have spent 49, I had at that point spent 49 years of my life living in service of others. That's what I was here for.
Yeah.
I was here to serve others, help others, please others, make others happy, be a joy bringer. I'd taken on that role. So to suddenly be plunged into this space of, I have to A, acknowledge that I have needs, and B, find a way to meet them.
See, that's the bit of the book where I was like, Richard, how do you know me? How did you know I needed to hear this? Because again, it's such a familiar role for so many people. And I said at the beginning, this book isn't just about the cancer journey that you've had. It's those, and there's lots of those messages that come through that book. And I think that's what you're doing beautifully now, but you've done it beautifully in the book. And it doesn't matter if you listen to this podcast first, still read the book, because you could open that book on any page, any part of the story, read a page and just be like, wow, there is something profound in every page,
Well,
on
it's
every
very
page.
kind of you to say.
It was very kind of you to write it and to give it to us, because that's what you've done. More than kind, it's essential, I think, for people to read, especially the people pleasers and the fixers and the helpers, especially the psychotherapists and the coaches. As a profession, depending on your background, some people have got amazing boundaries and understand how much they've got to look after themselves as well. And then there's those of us, might be me, that do have that same thought process as you. That's what I'm here for. You know, the self-abandonment of I am not enough, is it me that makes my dad unhappy? That so many people have experienced as children. If you then go into a caring, helping profession, your identity is wrapped up in, well, I am good enough because that person there said I'm really good. And it's not an ego thing, it's a survival thing. And from my perspective anyway, and from lots and lots of people, and I think for you as well, although ego comes into it, of course, but I think that desire to be that person for everybody else so that you can prove that you're enough is really overwhelming. And then to hear your story and just be reminder, guys, this can literally stop. And you're going to have to work out who you actually are as well underneath that part of you. Because we're in several parts. And the idea is that if we're tapping into just one, then we're not doing ourselves any favours. And that is your story. That's your story, where you were on the up, and on the ascent, like the kite, you know, making it all the way. And then all of a sudden, bang, it hits the grass. And then there's all this disappointment.
And I think there'd been a few moments of, you know, kind of quite crashing descent, really. And
with the marriage,
and I just didn't have a way of dealing with it and making sense of my role in it, and making adaptation and becoming more discerning and more, I guess, more conscious. I mean, many of us, and you know this, that we're living numbed out lives because life feels too difficult sometimes.
Yeah.
Life is, for a lot of people, incredibly hard. And there is enormous loss and grief. We're still on the back of COVID, of where there is loss of people in our lives, but loss of what was familiar, and what was normal, and what was predictable, and what was comfortable, and loss of jobs, and I know I'm often challenged by people going, yeah, but our lives have also become, in so many ways, more brilliant than they were. Absolutely, for sure they are. More examples of, but look at the ascent that's happened as a result of this utter shit.
Yeah.
Of course. And the whole premise of really what I write about in the book is we must be better at holding both.
Yes.
Hold the ascent and acknowledge it and celebrate that. For a lot of people have had incredible breakthroughs since COVID, of leaving a job and following their heart and setting up their own business, or relationships have changed, or their community has completely changed from what it ever used to be. there's a lot of people that are experiencing those wonderful moments of flight, and there are still a lot of us living in the fall that happened.
Yeah.
And for me, that's that bit about how do we become better at holding both of them. It's the both and piece rather than the either or. It's not about, only look at descent or only look at ascent. We have both, and they're often entwined, and one often comes disguised as the other. But we don't have an easy, straightforward model that encourages us to celebrate the ascent and celebrate the enormous wisdom that is within the descent.
And that's the word wisdom, because there's so much to gain from facing the dark. There's so much to gain from facing the loss and the grief, and appreciation, I think, is one of the things that comes from that. But I think reality, to live in reality sometimes, which is, like you say, we numb out from that. And there's so many different ways you can numb out from that now. And what I love about the book is that, interestingly, it had this real nuance of taking me out of the reality I was sitting in on the train, surrounded by lots of noise, but really making me look at my reality, like that present moment. There was this dichotomy, really, because I'm sitting here away from the reality of what's going on around me, whilst I'm really looking at myself through your words and having to assess who I am, but in the most safe, beautiful way, considering I wasn't with you in that moment. You weren't holding space for me in that moment. It was the book that you had written that was doing that. And I have to keep saying that because it's a really unusual book in that way. It really does do this. For me, anyway, that was my experience, and I can only talk about my experience of it, but it really allows you to feel safe and seen and heard and held in the most public of places, which is more credit to you. But I think what you've suppressed for so long, and how you'd self-abandoned, and how you've been curious to look at other people, and then having that grief and that loss of yourself, somehow you've just been able to articulate that in a way that will resonate for such a long time, well, forever. Anyone that ever reads that book, be it now or 50 years from now or 100 years from now, will have that experience, I think. And the thing that's even more interesting about it is that you're a man. I don't know if you know this.
I am.
I hate to break it to you in case you were concerned, but no, you are.
No, it's good to know that.
I can confirm.
Yeah.
Well, I can't confirm, actually, just to be clear.
You can't. Yes.
But
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm close enough.
We'll assume.
Yeah.
But with that comes all of the things that we talked about off camera, but a little bit on camera. The difficulty of expression, but also you were born in the 70s, like me, and life has changed incredibly for the experience of being a man now. Everything's changed really, really quickly, but men still have a very biological, physiological link to primitive man. A lot of that, some of it quite controversial, but a lot of the way that men look at women and, young girls and are attracted to quite young girls and their bodies. There's a biological, physiological reason for that. And I think we shame men for the bits that are actually quite natural. And I use that first, the attraction to, I'm not saying all men are attracted to younger girls, but there's a biological reason why. We live a lot longer now, and back in those caveman days, boys and girls were procreating a bit earlier and dying a lot earlier as well. So men noticing a girl's body develop would have been essential to know whether she was ready to procreate. So it's still biologically wired in. So if we look at that and then understand the social rules and how we have to manage those things, but then if we start talking about emotions and expression and processing as well, obviously our prefrontal cortex has evolved quite a lot over the last few hundred years, but there's a lot for us to, well, in some people, but there's a lot for us to even just digest in that few sentences there about being a man in a modern world. And I say that because the book was written so openly and with emotion and with artistic threads thrown in as well. So it was, done so well. And yet I'm sure that there's still a lot of those struggles with emotional and mental well-being of the man's experience. So as a man, and also as a man that's probably coached lots of men and had relationships with men that talk openly or try to talk openly, what's your take on being a man today?
I mean, I probably have a slightly warped view of this because I don't think I'm a very manly man.
In what way do you mean that?
So, I think in terms of your archetypal alpha male, I don't think I've, look, from a very early age, I decided that I wanted to be an actor and a singer, and I think I've always been an incredibly sensitive soul, a very sensitive boy. I absorb a lot. I soak up a lot. I feel it in the deepest parts of my body. And I think I grew up, I decided I wanted to be an actor. I went off and I would go and do dance classes on a Friday night. And I would go and do modern jazz and tap dancing on a Friday night. Well, so here I was 9 or 10, coming up to 10. I was the only boy there. I think the girls were often quite uncomfortable, didn't quite know what to make of this boy that was there. And I didn't quite know, I felt a little bit awkward, but I kind of got on with doing the thing that I really wanted to do. But what I did have to do was I had to lie to the boys in my class what I was doing on a Friday evening. And the problem was that these dance classes were at a village hall. So my mum would rock up to the village hall in the car. I'd jump out, I'd have a look around, I'd run in. And then there'd be these really big, very high glass windows that covered the back of this hall. And all kinds of the bright lights were on. And I'd be in there in my lycra and my tap shoes. And then I'd see walking past a group of my friends.
Oh no!
And this would happen on a regular basis. And I'd say, can we close the curtains, do you think, please? And they go, no, we'll leave the curtains open. And I'm like, so I would literally look away and I'd go over to my bag and they'd go, Richard, can you come back onto the floor, please? It was very strict, very, very strict. And then I'd see some of them staring in through the window. And I would openly lie to them about, I was just doing some some just playing, it's like playing games thing, a bit like Cubs. But with tap shoes.
And lycra.
I would stand there going, I know this is utter bullshit, but I think I can probably convince them. And I think I did a relatively good job. Or they were so confused. It was like a Darren Brown moment where they'd be like, and they were completely tranced out. And then I'd walk off and they wouldn't remember any of it. And that would happen on a regular basis. But there I was in this environment going, I don't know. Never drawn to football. I was never drawn to particularly boyish things. I always felt a bit uncomfortable around the boys at school that would talk about the girls starting to develop breasts under their jumpers, and they wouldn't talk about them in such a charming way. And I always just thought, oh, that's a bit awkward. I'm a bit I don't feel like I can be involved in this. And then that's always stayed with me. In theatre environment, it was much easier to manage. But when I left and started to play around in a corporate space, I would find groups of men very difficult to be with.
Yeah.
because felt like I didn't have a language. I didn't know how to be with them. I didn't know what types of things to talk about. I couldn't really talk about the sport thing. It was just a little bit loud, a little bit too in your face. I just felt really uncomfortable, and I didn't know how to be present with this particular group of people. And I think that's still true now. It's better. I have on my radar at the moment that maybe I would join some kind of men's groups. There's some men's open water swimming group, and they do some Tai Chi, and they do some ice baths, and I'm thinking, can I? Maybe I can. Maybe I'm going to find some of my kin there.
Yes, I bet you would.
And so kind of always weighing it up. I've got, obviously, I feel like I'm much more comfortable now to be all of myself and be the most fully human version of me. And that now means I don't need to bullshit it. I mean, I also was in a marriage where, I would often be mocked for, oh, but you're going to get your tap shoes out. You're going to take your tap shoes to the party. And, you haven't got a tool belt, have you? And I would always be mocked for not having a tool belt. I'd never be great at putting pictures up, or mirrors would be ever so slightly wonky. And all of those things. I would always absolutely do my best, but it just never seemed to work that well for me. Give me a song and some leg warmers, and I'd be like, okay, here, I come into my own. So I think, part of me goes, maybe I'm not the best person to ask.
Oh, you're definitely the best person to ask.
And maybe I am at the same time the best person to ask. And I think of it often as, if we think of it from an Eastern tradition of masculine and feminine energy, rather than men and women.
Yes.
I hold it that we all have access to a masculine energy, and we'll have access to what might be deemed feminine qualities. And I think we can also group them as mature. So we have mature masculine, and we have immature masculine, and we have mature feminine, and we have immature feminine. And we can probably pretty much all of us go, what sort of behaviours and characteristics might we see in both? I mean, right now, we've just finished an election in the UK. We look around at our political leaders. We look around at political leaders globally. There's a lot of immature masculine, willy-waving behaviours. And that's we see that there's a lot of that. We see a lot of that around. Yeah. And which is frightening for our young boys, our adolescents growing up, that's dominant. We see less of the mature masculine qualities, but also the mature masculine is about how do they also bring in a mature feminine quality. And I think, and I've had this conversation with Kelly a lot over the years about, I hope that I in some way embody this sweet spot of what happens when, I won't say mature, but my best effort at mature masculine and mature feminine meet. Yeah. What is that point where we have a relationship between the head and heart? So mature masculine might by default be strong thinkers, strategy, an ability to plan, an ability to work through, to have some structure. A mature feminine might be more heart-based, so dropped down into body and able to be reflective and present and an attunement and a tenderness. And if we look at that moment where these qualities come together, I think I'm certainly very conscious of bringing both of them to bear. I mean, I'm not going to say whether I do it well or not, but I am very conscious of how do I, as a man, I have a man's body, how do I bring mature feminine qualities to bear? Yeah. And how do I bring them with confidence? So how do I bring compassion and kindness and tenderness and creativity and really heartful, reflective, listening, attuned qualities, and at the same time, how do I develop and work on what is not as natural, my mature masculine qualities? And I hasten to add, I do have a tool belt. Since moving house, I have got a tool belt, and I wear it with pride, I have to say.
With your tap shoes, though, I hope.
A tap shoe in one side, leg warmer in the other, wrench.
I mean, that's perfection.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I think my daughter just went. So I think we're in a time now, and I think you and I talked, and I wrote something a while ago about it was Men's Health Week, and just this very strong sense of we're thinking about how men can be their most healthy. We're not doing a great deal for young boys. I think there's been a lot of attention on how we nurture our young girls, and how we bring our young girls up in an environment that in so many ways can be quite unsafe for them to live in. How do we help them actually bring both of their feminine qualities in all their glory, but also these masculine energy qualities in all their glory? I don't think we're doing quite as much to help our young boys.
No, we're definitely not.
And I think, we read newspaper articles about 12-year-old boys, the youngest people to have committed murder by knife.
Yeah.
On that poor 19-year-old man. And you just, I can't work that out. I can't begin to make sense of, where the hell have we got it all so horribly, horribly wrong? Systemically, what has happened?
Well, I've had this conversation with the wonderful Terry Christian, actually, about the fact that there's no youth clubs. There's no places for children. There's no community. So when you've got 12-year-old boys or younger or slightly older that don't have a place to be safe, to be around other boys and, male leaders in the youth clubs, sports or games, be it snooker or darts or, a glass of Coke and a bit of a laugh about whatever, because those spaces aren't available, if there is nowhere for them to go, the education system systemically is not getting it right now. We are seeing an increase in ADHD and autism, which again can be trauma-based, it can be epigenetic. The family systems have broken down. And this is what I was saying about how much life has changed since the 60s and 70s. I am a working woman, but, when I had my daughter, all my other friends were out of work. So there wasn't that community of women that all had children together, that were raising the children together. I was on my own, very much on my own, because we all do it at different times. And so I think that lack of community, the lack of a good education system, i.e. it's broken in many ways, and the lack of youth clubs and services available for kids just means that those that are traumatised, neglected, abused, neurodiverse have nowhere to go. And so the prefrontal cortex not being able to analyse and rationalise and logicalise, not being able to regulate emotion, these things are bound to happen.
They are. And if you think about, in indigenous tribes, and the elders would hold their adolescent boys on this rites of passage.
Yes.
And these, if we think about these key thresholds throughout our lifetime, from the birth and those first few formative weeks, right through until our retirement from our working lives and nearing the end of our lives and the loss of the people that we love most. we have all of these rites of passage along the way. There is a fundamental one for adolescence, and especially adolescent boys going through into their young manhood times.
Yeah.
And indigenous tribes, and still in indigenous tribes, there would be this rites of passage, and there would be vision quests, and the elders would be there as the guides to help these boys move through this phase that they deem to be one of the most vital phases.
Yes. Yeah.
And we don't have that, and youth clubs can offer that. And I know that there are more and more people. I think I certainly see them in US and Australia. And apologies to anyone in the UK who is doing it well, who I just haven't spotted. But it isn't high profile enough that we aren't offering spaces where, and we keep coming back to boys, and I'm not saying that the girls' stuff is all sorted, but the question was about boys.
Yes.
That there are few places where we are creating containers where our boys can be held safely and held with tough love, and I mean it from that. If we pitch it on a continuum of tough, and that's accountability, and that's firmness, and it's boundaries, and it's edges, and love. Yeah. And we get this point where just in the middle, and often people don't believe you can have one and the other. They believe it's either tough or it's lots of love.
No, it can be both.
And I think we can hold people accountable and firm, and we can do it with enormous heart. And that we're so behind on that, and we have an enormous way to go and to catch up. But we sadly are laden with role models which do not show that. Do not show firm holding. We see politicians it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And does nothing to teach our young boys how, as a young boy, how as a man, do I need to show up? Do I need to show up for myself? How can I be in relationship with myself whilst being in relationship with others? And we're all trying to figure out that dance. You as well, I guess, trying to figure out that dance of how do I remain in relationship with self whilst being in relationship with you? Yeah. And then I have to check back here, and then I have to go there. But we don't teach them that. We're not teaching that to our young boys or our young girls in schools. Again, sorry to the schools that would say we are great. They're outliers. Yeah. But I think it's an enormous problem. I find it frightening. I can't think about it for too long. I don't have an answer. I don't know what the solution is. I just know that we are, we're in such a pivotal time at the moment with our trajectory as humanity, with so many systems collapsing. Yeah. Our natural world is collapsing around us. But all of those systems, some of which you've mentioned, our health systems, our educational systems, our governmental systems, we're in a financial crisis. There is an enormous amount of dissent.
And again, that's why I said, whatever people think about your personal story, your book does speak to that whole experience of dissent. It's just that your story is laid into it. But what it doesn't do, sorry to interrupt, Ella, is that it doesn't do the. I don't want people to think that the book is a how-to book, because it isn't a how-to book, because in part because I didn't want to write a how-to book, and probably because I don't know how to. So I've written about this stuff that I know some touch points. I know some things that I believe are important and fundamental to holding both our ascent and our descent, holding loss, holding grief, finding a way to discharge, to process it and then discharge, and place down that which is just too heavy to carry. But I don't know a lot of the answers. You say it's not a how-to, and it's not written as a how-to, and it doesn't have the how-to instructions. There's no 10 steps. There's no 10 steps. No. However, because you make the reader feel something, you're allowing them to see themselves, you're allowing them to have a platform for themselves and a stage for themselves to really see themselves and have an experience of themselves that I don't think, and I work in this field, and I've had therapy, and I tell you, this book is special because it did something that nobody else has ever been able to do. And so, although the how-to isn't in 10 steps, you shine a torch on the individual. And that, I don't think that was ever your... Well, if it was your intention, you're certainly very humble about it and very modest about it, because it was an account, as you said at the beginning, for you to kind of collate the information of what had happened in a way that you just wanted to write. But that's what it does. So
it got to a point, I guess, where I had to turn it into something. So I'd written it, and I did write it in the form that I wanted to write it in. And you talked about the seasonality, and for me, seasonality helped me with rhythm.
Yeah.
I got the diagnosis in a winter. I went through my own wintering. I shed. All my leaves dropped. I was back to a bare skeleton of a tree, and then I went through into spring and to summer and to autumn. So seasons helped. Haiku helped me to crystallize the experience I was living through. So I wrote it with, I guess, all of those lenses, and at the point that the decision had been made that maybe we would publish it, then I was really clear on at least reflecting on and going back through the book to say, if someone picks this up to read, I want it to feel like I am stood alongside them. I want it to feel like I want it to be a book where people take the space. So if someone picks the book up and reads it as they might read any other book, which is, right, I'll just read it through, go through, read that one, read that haiku, and we don't kind of caress any of the haiku or caress any of the ideas and then put the book down and just kind of allow the idea to marinate, then the book will probably be just quite transactional for people, because there isn't a clear... Some people will get to the end, and I think I shared with you, one person I'd asked to kind of blurb the book and endorse it said, it just doesn't go anywhere for me. It's not how-to-y enough. And,
I couldn't believe it. I was actually angry.
And I kind of... And that's the type of book that they write, is a how-to book. And for some people, it won't be how-to enough. People will close the book and go, so now what do I do? And I'm all right with that. And
but then...
Because I think I don't know the steps myself.
We mentioned earlier, and I've got nothing against this process, a process called the Hoffman process. And I do feel quite aligned with some of the elements of that process. It's very trauma-focused and growth and all of that. I do feel, and before I even knew the Hoffman process, I was using some of those elements in my own practice. But it's not a magic wand. It doesn't matter how many retreats you go to, how many times you go and try ayahuasca or, these kind of magic cures to all traumas and pain. Nothing comes with a how-to. Not really. My book that I wrote, it is self-help and very much... That's not really a how-to. It's just you might find elements of it resonate with you. But let me be very clear, it's not therapy in a book. It's whatever it means to you. So I kind of disagree with the idea that it's not a how-to, because it shines a light on something. It gives you a step somehow. It might not be a clear step, but it does. And that's what any experience should offer. Just something where you see yourself. Like you said, it's that dance of holding space for myself, holding space for you. So I know what she means when she says that, the person that you'd asked to do the blurb on it. But I also strongly disagree that it doesn't offer something. And in fact, it offers a lot. It's just not done in a very systematic way. And maybe that's what she meant more.
It shines a light on, and as you and I both know, a lot of people are light dodgers.
Yes.
Because they don't want the light shone on things.
Yeah.
They want their stuff to be tucked away in the darkness, deep down in the basement, pushed away, door closed.
Yeah.
So therefore light shining doesn't work for them, because they're super skilled at avoiding the light.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. And I guess in a way, having a cancer diagnosis forced me to turn the light on and look at that which I haven't wanted to make room for. And
people will need to read the book to understand the levels of experience within that cancer diagnosis. And you share within the book some really personal experiences of going through the stem cell, what is
Transplant.
it? Transplant, that's it. I don't know why I forgot that word, it's my age. And I didn't know what it was really until you explained it through the book. And I really want people to read it, so I don't want to say too much, but I felt like to say, if we said this was a story of your cancer diagnosis, it just doesn't do it justice. It's just a part of it. It's a massive part of your experience and trauma and the way that you will now view life through that lens. But there's so much more to it. And it's even listening today, I think people can get that impression because the way you talk is beautiful. I love listening to you. When you send me voice notes, which you do, when you're walking the dog, it's just the most favourite moment for me. I usually listen either very, very late or before I get on with my day. And I just think this is just such a gift. It's just like tiny little podcasts that you send me. They're brilliant. They're funny. The way you talk is poetic. But the little annoyances when you're on the walk, as soon as you start talking, the noise comes in.
It's funny. I had a friend who a few months ago, I'd left her a voice note and she'd responded saying, do you know what? I'm babysitting a friend of mine, child, and I just was playing your voice note and it's the first time they've stopped crying. Aww. They've been crying for about 2 hours non-stop and then they were fascinated by your voice.
Yeah.
And then it ended and then they started crying again. So I went back to the beginning and I put it on again and I'm like, brilliant. I mean, how do we monetize that?
Well, I'm going to sell it. I'm not going to share any of the money with you.
I was thinking, this is not a silly idea.
Honestly.
What story do they want now?
I think your voice and the way you narrate whatever experience you're having in the moment, doesn't matter whether you're walking through a wheat field or whether your dog is crying because it's lost a sock because of a wart between its pads.
Yeah.
The way you tell, I don't care what you talk about. You have the Joanna Lumley effect and the David Attenborough effect. You could talk about anything. It doesn't matter. I will listen like this.
Well, there has to be a business idea in there somewhere.
Well, maybe you should do a podcast, Richard. Even if your podcast is you
it's
talking.
A lot of effort, but I don't know what I'd need to talk about. So it's better, see, when it's unplanned. The fact that I can just riff and kind of just like
a musical instrument.
Yeah, but do people want to listen to that?
Yes, they do.
Well, you do.
I do.
That's one person. How many people listen to your podcast, Richard? One.
Well, there'll be more than that because I would push your podcast on my podcast.
Well, Kelly would have to listen to it to edit it, and she'd go, "But you don't say anything."
No, but I think
really
this is the bit. You don't need to say anything because.
Well, then it would be a mime. How are you presenting your podcast? Through the medium of mime.
Well, what I mean is...
I keep turning the volume up, complaint emails. I put the volume on high and I can't hear anything. That's because I don't say anything. I sit there, I channel the message. If you can't tune in, that's a problem with your tuning.
The problem is you, not me. No, but what
I
mean
didn't say
by
that because it's in silence.
I tell you, I've just had a brilliant idea. Do you remember points of view?
Yeah.
You could have people just writing to you about whatever is going on in the world, and you could literally pick a letter to, and you could pick us up. You could say, this week, look at us business planning. You could say, this week, I would like you to, send me messages about the elections or the weather or travel. And I'll pick a letter and for 15 minutes, you'll be a 15 to 20 minute podcast. I will talk about your letter. I will answer your letter. That is a cracking idea and you must do it. Look, those voice notes you send me, you could literally do as a podcast in response to a message.
You mean because they're so long? Just
yeah. But as long as you don't stop sending me voice notes as well, because you can't do one and not the other. That's not fair.
Well, I mean, it's good for a voice noter. But I have a daughter who goes, God, can you not leave me voice notes? She got really cross with me last week. Can you stop sending me voice notes? I don't always have reception. I can't always listen to them. I'm somewhere noisy and then I can't save them and then I can't go back to them.
Just send them to me.
And I told Kelly and Kelly's like, yeah, actually, I feel the same. I'm like, oh. So the two of them, what they want is a one-liner of text.
No, I don't.
That's what they want.
I really hope you continue forever to send me voice notes. Even if it's just once a week.
Well, you have to subscribe to the podcast.
I will. I will subscribe to the podcast. All you need, you've got a beautiful space. You just need a microphone and a camera. And you could do it. I honestly think that'd be great. Honestly, because you're such a good orator.
But what if nobody sends me any letters?
I'll just send you letters. Ella's written in again.
No, but in all seriousness, actually well, maybe it's not even interesting, but it's in all seriousness, is that I think that before being ill, I follow bright, shiny, silver things.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a great idea. We could do a business about that, and I could write a book about that, and I could do a podcast about that, and we could do a documentary about that, and all of these things. And Kelly is the same, has an incredibly entrepreneurial brain. The difference is that she turns her ideas into something, and I just go, oh, there's another idea. Look, there's another idea. So, and all of them take enormous, you run a business and you have the podcast and all of those things require marketing and time, and we have to talk about them, and we have to understand our avatar, and we have to find our avatar, and we have to appeal to them and. And I think up until the point of being unwell, I have done a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And I've got past the point of being ill, and I now go, I can't do that.
Yeah, I can't. I haven't got the energy.
I just want to deadhead the roses.
And do you know what? If that's what makes you happy, then that's enough. It's just that simple, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's a real, because there's a real push and pull in there about noticing, of going, oh yeah, maybe I could. And I know what I'll do. I'll lie there tonight going, yeah, maybe I should do points of view. Maybe I could do that, and I wonder how that would work. And Kelly, what do you think? Now, Ella says that she thinks it would be a really good idea, and Kelly, another idea. And I'll go, yeah, but maybe I could, and maybe I could do it. Maybe I could do it about roses and deadheading roses, and maybe people could write it. And that's what I'll do, and then I'll go, oh, fucking hell.
That bloody Ella.
That's too much effort. There's nothing like a bit of life-altering, life-changing illness or descent to bring your focus back in to present. And I talk about in the book of this idea, Assagioli's idea of holding bifocal vision. We must be able to focus on what is here and look at it and make some sense of it, but we must also then be able to adjust our focus and see longer term. And I look at this bit and look at what do I want to do now, that because I still have to heal. I still have, I have peripheral neuropathy. I have feet that have a lot of pain, but at the same time, parts of them are numb. That's probably only going to get worse. I have a massive impact on my hearing since being unwell. I still have gut stuff going on. And I still feel like my body is pretty busted. I've got an immunity that's shot to bits. Yeah. So I go about my days, some days going, rock and roll. We live in a beautiful part of the world. We've got amazing land. We've got some animals we take care of. All of these things. So I'm looking at this bit, and I am also looking at that future bit. And I don't have any enormous ideas that a lot of people do have when they're ill of, I must do everything. I must do all these bucket list things. I haven't got any of that. I go, God, I've done shitloads with my life.
Yes.
I've travelled, I think, to every continent. I've spoken, I've sung in some of the biggest opera houses on the planet. I've done really cool things with really cool people. I feel like I don't need to do loads more. So I definitely don't have I must do a load of things because I might die suddenly. And yet I also know that there's a reality of relapse. And that's very real, whilst I can live in a positive world of going, we do an enormous amount for me to stay well. There's a reality check that says, I have an incurable lymphoma that likes to come back. I had the mild form of a stem cell transplant. So I did the safest version, which was taking my own cells out, giving them a bit of a wash and a scrub and putting them back in.
Yeah.
that means that for me, that's much easier for my body because my body is taking my own cells back again.
Yeah.
And there's no chance of rejecting a donor cell. There wasn't a donor for me. There were no donor existed. Siblings weren't a match, and there were no good matches on the donor database. So that wasn't an option. But were I to have had a stem cell transplant that was donor-led, it would have been an enormous risk for my body because you live with a whole other list of life-altering illnesses, potential for, because you have donor cells within you. But what you do have is that your chances of the cancer coming back drop right down, because really you're clearing out your own cells and they're being replaced by cells that you hope are healthy. That I guess there's always a little bit of stuff left in the very bottom of the pot. And so, I'm kind of living with that and going, how do I live the most purposeful life? We've come here to try and live on the land, to try and build a bit of a community, to run our cancer charity, to do good things, to model what living in a kind of mature masculine, mature feminine, slightly off-gridish way might be, and at the same time heal, and at the same time not wake up and have lists of 100 things to do for setting up the new big business because I must make a dent on the world. And that's always what I believed. I wrote the first book. Jolt was all about disrupt your own world before your world is disrupted for you.
Yeah.
And I wrote that bloody book and I didn't pay attention.
It's so...
Because the book is about, if you don't listen to the nudges and the taps on your shoulder, soul is always wanting to come through us. Soul is always emergent. Call it what you will, whatever word works for you. Soul, self, true nature, true essence is always wanting to come through, is always finding a way to get our attention. And it tried to get my attention. It tapped me with a disc prolapse and spinal surgery. It tapped me with kidneys. It tapped me with a divorce. So it tapped me lots, and I listened and I went, God, that's really serious. And then I got back into what was most familiar and comfortable, and look at me, I'm actually a bit of a superhero, all those other things were, small fry stuff. And soul's going, well, we'll keep tapping. It keeps tapping until we pay attention. And it tapped really, really hard. And if I don't keep paying attention, my belief is that soul will just keep tapping. So here I am going, how do I best live, be the most fully human I can be, this kind of this anthroposophical way, which is the art and science of being most fully human. How do I live that way and be purpose-led, and at the same time take care of myself and heal this system with the belief of if this system is as well as it can be, the world around me is healthier. It can't not be just by how I take myself into a supermarket or a restaurant or a dog walk and someone I meet on the dog walk, or it can't not be. It can't not be better.
I totally agree.
Sorry, that was a massive rant.
No, it was not a rant. It was, again, poetic and beautiful. So the more the better. But I guess one of the final things I want to touch on, because you've said something there about the peripheral neuropathy and the pain. And there's a lot of people living in chronic pain. And because we can't see it, we don't really pay that much attention to them. We don't see that disability because it is.
It's invisible.
It's invisible. And we know that inflammation also has an impact on the mind because of neurotransmitter activity and so on and so forth. So it's all linked. And in the book, I remember you saying, which reminded me of a friend of mine that's constantly in chronic pain and so many different complications, long-term illness stuff. People really don't understand what it's like to be in chronic pain unless they're in a chronic condition situation. What's that mean to you? Because this is kind of new, I suppose, this real extreme chronic condition.
I mean, it's the pain aspect is managed quite well, but with strong painkillers, I take neuropathic painkillers, which are pretty heavy duty.
And not great for the liver.
They're not great for the liver. Well, they're not great for any part of my body. And but you know, and I try and reduce them and come off them. And then it gets to winter and the cold kicks in and the pain increases. So then I up them again. I also know that the particular tablet I take has an antidepressant, anti-anxiety element to it. And I do wonder how much that also helps me and supports me. So there have been a few times where I've got close to running out or running low of medication, or maybe I've forgotten to take one. And psychologically and emotionally, I notice that, and that hits me quite hard.
Yeah.
So that's not stuff I want to be reliant on. And I have to weigh that up. I have to weigh up the pain versus the psychological impact versus the long-term impact on my body. So, you know, there is all of that, but the chronic condition really is about, well, I suppose is about, and it's how, I guess how we've talked about cancer from the start of this adventure, is that we have to be in relationship with it.
Yeah.
So it's trusting that cancer for me serves a purpose. It's arrived in our life for a reason, that a lot of people will stand firmly in the fuck cancer camp, will battle cancer, they fight cancer.
Yeah.
And for us, and there is no right, certainly no right or wrong way, or better or worse way. We made a choice to go. Cancer was hammering at our door. It was going to smash our door down. There was no point in hoping that we could nip out the back door and it would never find us. So we made the choice to open the door, and we invited cancer in, and we said, we lay a place for you at the table. You sit at the table with us, but we have to build a relationship.
Yeah.
And that's what we've attempted to do. And I know a lot of people won't like that idea, and it won't sit easy with them, because they think that if you're not fighting it, they go real binary response to it. If you're not fighting it, then you must be going, oh well, come on then, cancer, take me. And we've far from done that at all. But what we have attempted to do is to say, we have to understand, is back to the wisdom. Illness, any chronic illness, brings wisdom, brings intelligence. It invites us to look at the whole. And we miss a trick if we just go into pathologizing it. I think we have to, if we can bear to, because actually it requires some bravery, is to say, what is this here to teach us? How is this here to educate us? If it were here to offer guidance, and if it were here to be a point of learning in our life, or if it was soul wanting to get our attention, we travel so far away from soul. Like kind of, you know, I believe we come out as soul, and we're in our truest form. And very early on, we have our primal wounding and our small T traumas and big T traumas, and we start to make adaptation, and we find ways to build our survival personality or our full self, or whatever school of thinking you're from. And so we build this personality, and we make more adaptation and another bit that shields us. And so we go on, and we get to our life, and we get to our grown-up years, and we do psychometrics, and they go, this is the type of person you are, and there's a personality test. But we've become estranged from soul.
Yes.
And you know, and a part of this is about, for me, just for me, it's not the truth, it's just my truth, is that we've become so estranged and so disconnected. Chronic illness is asking us to journey home. So it's saying, how do you find the greatest connection and mirror between personality and your true essence?
Yeah.
And how are they, as much as possible, a reflection of each other? So I think, that's my view, that chronic illness, any life-altering condition, invites us to at least wonder about how much of our true essence has been repressed and suppressed, and that the call we get to say, you have a life-changing illness, is, what is that wanting us to do? Yes, there's a physical piece. how do we best manage this symptoms and pain that is very real? Is not. I try and have this conversation with my daughter Mia about things, and she thinks that means that then the pain is made up. I'm like, no. The pain isn't made up. The pain is very real, very, very real. But that doesn't mean that that's it in isolation. We have to say the psychotherapy that I trained in, psychosynthesis, is about this synthesizing of all of these aspects and elements. So of course the body is one, but heart and emotions is another, mind is another, spirit is another. So if we look at all of these dimensions, there's wisdom in all of them. And I go about, I sit here, it's easy to sit here and talk about it in a really focused way. There are days when I miss it, and there are days where I still go to therapy on a Friday morning, and I spent a week missing it, being frustrated, fucked off with me, with other people. It's been a really stressful week. I've lost sight of things. I get frustrated with my body that it's not as resilient. It can't do what it used to do. And then I try and ease it, but I take the learning from that and try and make some sense of it and find a way to bring it back to this place of congruence again. But that's not easy. I don't find that easy at all. And I believe it will be life's work. It will be my life's work. I'm not going to reach a point where I go, that's it, got it.
No one ever does, do they?
Boom.
Who does?
I don't know. Probably not, but I wouldn't want that anyway. And I've asked the question a lot of times of people, and rhetorically, of, why an incurable cancer for me? Why not just a lymphoma that you can cure and then you're in remission and then you're out of the groove of healthcare? Why do I have something that means I need to keep checking? And I think that's a part of my life lessons, a part of my purpose being here, is about that need to stay. Having an incurable cancer keeps me truthful, keeps me conscious, keeps me in check, means that I can't really have a day or two or three or four where I go, I don't give a fuck. I do have to think about all of these levels. It's like I was fascinated by the people who run the sound desks on musicals and just these micro adjustments that they make that completely transform the experience. And I think that's my role, is to make these micro adjustments, to turn that bit up and to turn that bit down and to move this one and to turn that one off. And that's my, but in order to be really good at running a sound desk, you can't just go, well, I know what really good sound is, so I set the levels and I walk away. It's about, in this moment, with these bodies in this theatre at this temperature and these people on stage and those depth musicians in. But that's true for all of us, isn't it? Right? We get up each day and we go, I have to make these tiny adjustments based on context, people, temperature, lights, question.
What would you say, I guess, as a final closing piece, because I'm mesmerised by you, by the way. I don't know if you can tell. I'm just staring at you like, I love
I think
this
you're
man.
bored.
I'm not. I swear to God.
I see you going like that.
No, I am mesmerised. But
I'm used to watching people going, it must nearly be finished.
No. But I will extract you going, oh dear. And just play that at the beginning and the end.
That's okay. That's all right. I'm all right with that.
Oh dear. No. You do speak so beautifully.
Oh no, I pulled my microphone.
Oh, he's pulled his mic. This is how exciting it's got. All people will be able to hear is.
Yeah. Anyway, back on track.
Keep track. For those people that don't have the desire for, maybe they're the dodgers, the light dodgers, or maybe they're 15 years into chronic pain or 20 years in, perhaps they've been met with a lot of pushback from friends and families who just don't get, and they don't have the support system, or perhaps they hate themselves for whatever reason and they can't get to that space of these tiny adjustments and the reflection of self, going back to that self and trying to be curious about the essence and hold space for that. What would you say to
It's hard work, isn't it? I listen to you say all those things and I go, sounds like too much hard work.
But that's what you're doing.
Yeah, I know. Maybe it is too much hard work.
Maybe we should not end on
Yeah, no.
Maybe it's just too much hard work. End.
No, but actually, in fact, it is, because it is effort.
Yeah.
And it is work, and it takes persistence, and it takes a quality of will, I think, which is, I mean, we think of will often as being strong will, which is the tough it out bit. And Asa Jolie talks about these other qualities of will, one being goodwill, which is a really important, that we offer goodwill to ourselves and others. Strong will, which is the tough it out, just kind of, sometimes we just got to crack on with things. The skillful will, which is often is the bit that is missed, which is, how do I do that thing in what feels like the most effortless way possible? And then we've got transpersonal will, which I guess is a sense of there is more than just us that collides and combines to create will and motion.
And interestingly, that's in terms of energetically, will and self-identity and self-esteem is all in the solar plexus area of the body. That's where we hold, I guess, the traumas that are associated with those things, not too far from the liver. So if your liver is overloaded and toxic, and you might not be processing emotions very well, and if you're stressed, it puts a lot of pressure on the organs. And so I do wonder if there is that answer to that question, because I suppose it's so individualised.
I talked over you. I don't even know what the last question was. You said, let's go with one final point to people. And I'm like,
what's the point? It's for those people that are not in that space to be able to make those micro adjustments and to be able to give time, or again, their self-esteem might be so dashed by what's going on for them. What would you say is a piece of advice, not necessarily advice, but wisdom that you can impart? That's too much of a question, isn't it? I don't even know why I asked it. That's massive.
I mean, the very honest answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because then maybe if I did, maybe I'd have written that book.
Yeah.
Because maybe that's the bit that everyone is seeking.
But there is something really profound in your book, which is about the space and the time and the pause.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that would probably be the bit that I would be most drawn to, which is that spaciousness allows us to look and wonder and be curious and acknowledge that we need to ask for help and listen to what the response is. And I don't think we can go with any one of those threads. We probably have to go with all of them. But I think we are living, and the premise of the idea of the spaces between the notes is that, musicians play a lot of notes, and the difference between the good musicians and the extraordinary ones is that the extraordinary musicians, same notes, make room between the notes, because the space between the notes is what gives them the choice to be discerning and thoughtful and considered and check that their audience is still even there. So we are living in a time where we have more notes available to us and that we are expected to play than ever before. And people wake up, and whether they are already spending more of their time at home in their own little world, living with a chronic illness, they will be playing lots of notes, even if it's just psychologically, just through thought. They will play note after note after note, and they will bounce from one to the other. And I guess the question is, how can you start to make some room between those notes, just a tiny bit, just again, micro adjustments, and trusting that when we bring space and when we bring room to something, it's like when we strip a room of all its furniture And we go, well, actually, it's far more spacious than we thought.
Yes.
I had no idea that when you take those curtains off or when you take those lights away, or we notice, we go, well, the room looks different.
Yeah.
Just by clearing out. Brilliant comic timing is not because of the line that they might say. It's because of the moment, the beat just before it and the beat just after it. And I wonder what it's like if in our own life we just take some beats just before and just after. And that, for many, that will still be very, very difficult. And that might be, a part of that might be those beats. We might find ways of connecting those beats and pauses with nature. And I think that, nature is a big part of the book, and nature has been a big part of my healing. And I think nature offers us many of the answers.
Yeah.
For how we can live better and differently with ourselves and with others. The answers are out there. We just have to look out, and we have to start adjusting to it and wondering about it. And lots of the stuff that we struggle with ourselves, nature doesn't struggle with. Nature has a way. But I think being in nature, Mother Earth has this enormous capacity to go, give me whatever you can't take.
Yes.
I will absorb all that you can't take. And if we interpret that to mean we can just trample on it and give it all our shit and not do anything to help replenish it and care for it, then we are misguided. It, of course, like anything, it asks us to be a part of this exchange and dance. And nature, but if we take care of the world around us, Mother Earth has this enormous capacity to go, give me what you can't carry. It's just put your bags down for a moment. Place all of your bags down, the things you were carrying. Pick them all up again in exactly the same configuration, if you like. And you might just pick them up differently. You might go, how strange that I still carry that. I don't use it. So I'll just leave that down there. Already we changed the balance of our system. And I don't say that is a first easy step. There's no easy first step, because otherwise we'd have done it. The first step to being with our condition and ourselves is tough.
One thing that you've definitely done today is let us see your...
Oh, I don't think I'm going to stop talking.
No, I could honestly be here forever.
I know. You keep saying that. I do believe you. You can't be here forever because we're going to have to bring the dog back in, the
poor dog's been sitting outside for 6 whole hours, begging to come
midnight.
in. But you have shown us yourself, your soul, in the book and on this episode. You've really gone very deep and detailed, actually. Trying to keep some detail for the book, but I can't imagine anyone that will, because obviously this is quite long, so people will start and stop very much like you would reading a book. All of my podcasts are, because I don't know how to wrap things up. But there's something in that, which is that you can revisit that space again and again and rewind and take things in. And again, with the book, you could listen to this anywhere and
just to numb out. If you go, God, my life's so bad, but if I just put this on, then I can just numb out.
No, not with me cackling away. That's enough to just wake anybody
up. Oh yeah, jolts them back into consciousness. And then he starts talking.
No.
Like Paul McKenna.
No. It's been beautiful as I expected. And I'm so grateful because, as I've said about 467 times, I really already love you so much. From that book, I was just in love with you. And from there, that's only grown. And this has just been another example of why. And I think everybody's going to be able to understand what I'm saying when they listen and read. So thank you for... You must be exhausted, but thank you for doing this.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for seeing something in the book and in me that left you curious enough to
and
travel
in love.
All the way here.
But and in love with you, your home, Kelly, the dog that's been sitting out there for now 7 hours. He's not really sitting outside. Just to get to the end and was like,
No.
RSPCA.
Yeah, he's not.
But yeah, thank you for having me. Aww.
Anytime.